Mr. President, yesterday we met in the consultations room and listened to UN Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura describe the daily, deadly, indiscriminate bombings raining down on eastern Aleppo. We heard Special Envoy de Mistura implore the Security Council to take urgent action to avert a large-scale massacre, noting that failure on our part would be a tragedy and a stain on this Security Council that lingers like others in recent history. The resolution vetoed by Russia today had a simple demand and one goal: stop the bombing in Aleppo City. Over the last 2 weeks, Russia and the Assad regime have launched a terrifying military offensive in eastern Aleppo that has laid waste to an area of the city with 275,000 civilians trapped inside of it. Airstrikes from this Russian and Syrian regime offensive have systematically eliminated whatever infrastructure was left to support the people of eastern Aleppo. Hospitals bombed, pumps for drinking water bombed, ambulances and fire trucks for first responders bombed, families trapped under the rubble, hundreds of civilians dead, hundreds of thousands of civilians at risk of literally starving to death if nothing changes. The Secretary General has described Aleppo as worse than a slaughterhouse. The UN Special Envoy has warned the city will be completely destroyed by the end of the year. And we know the cause. The airstrikes conducted by Russia and the Assad regime are the cause. Russia and Assad want to seize eastern Aleppo to further bolster the regime in Damascus. Russia could not let this resolution stand in their way, so they vetoed it. Russia dropped its veto here in the Security Council to strengthen Bashar al-Assad at the expense of 275,000 Syrians. We have heard so many warnings in this chamber, so many words of anguish offered, so many descriptions of the barbarism that is unfolding. Simply put, today was time for the Council to act, to learn the lessons of the recent past. We failed to do that because one of us, perversely the President of the United Nations Security Council, is intent on allowing the killing to continue and indeed participating in carrying it out. It is grotesque. Russia, as always, will offer a different narrative. Russia has said that they are fighting terrorism. They will probably somehow blame the United States of America for the suffering in Aleppo. They will suggest that we are the ones not serious about the fight against terrorism. They will invoke past conflicts in distant lands, and they will lie. In short, they will do anything and everything to deny and deflect from the truth. The truth is that Russia is using counterterrorism as an excuse to help the Assad regime retake control of Aleppo by brutal force, snuff out whatever opposition groups dare to resist the Assad regime's brutality, and cow civilians who yearn for a different government into submission. As Secretary of State John Kerry said, this is a targeted strategy to terrorize civilians and kill anybody and everybody who is in the way of their military objectives. There is no other plausible explanation. Why else would the first targets in the Syrian-Russian offensive be hospitals and bases for first responders, which should have been protected? Why else would each hospital in eastern Aleppo have been struck not once, but at least twice? Why else would a convoy of life-saving humanitarian aid bound for Aleppo be destroyed? One doesn't have to be an international legal scholar to know that there is a term that may well describe these actions: war crimes, and they must be investigated. Russia cannot use the presence of what the United Nations estimates to be a couple of hundred members of al-Nusra to justify an indiscriminate aerial bombing campaign devastating an entire population of hundreds of thousands of civilians currently trapped by Russia and the regime. Russia has the privilege of serving as a permanent member of the Security Council with a responsibility to maintain international peace and security. But through the campaign it describes as counterterrorism, Russia has become one of the chief purveyors of terror in Aleppo, using tactics more commonly associated with thugs than governments. Russia and the Assad regime think the world will look the other way if they recite the word counterterrorism. That is wrong, and each and every one of us must make that clear to Russia. There are terrorists in Syria, a lot of them. The United States doesn't need anyone to explain why terrorists are serious, deadly, and dangerous. That there are terrorists in Syria is the reason the United States leads a 67-member coalition in the region to fight them. It is why the United States remains unambiguous in our call for opposition groups to separate themselves from al-Nusra. It is why this week the United States conducted an airstrike that targeted a senior Nusra leader in Idlib, Syria. The United States will be relentless in our fight against terrorism. We spent months looking for a way to work with Russia on a campaign that would have effectively targeted al-Nusra. We agreed on a way forward that would have allowed us to focus on terrorist targets. In return, we asked that Russia show a good faith commitment by upholding a cessation of hostilities and allowing for humanitarian aid. When presented with this opportunity to cooperate on counterterrorism, Russia decided to walk away. Russia decided to ignore this council's repeated calls to implement the cessation of hostilities. Russia decided that it would support the Assad regime's military campaign to retake every inch of Syria, to use Assad's own words. Some here today will criticize this resolution for lacking balance. But there is no balance in the bombardment of eastern Aleppo. It's simple. Russia and the Assad regime have launched the deadliest campaign of aerial bombardment since 2011. Russia and the Assad regime are using incendiary weapons and bunker bombs, which are magnifying human suffering, hitting even doctors trying to treat patients in basement emergency rooms, because nowhere else was safe. Russia and the Syrian regime are causing this bloody chaos. So we must demand that the ones responsible for this air campaign stop. This is not how you defeat terrorists, it's how you create them. In this conflict, violence begets violence. Our effort today was to stop bombardments over Aleppo, nothing more. It's a deadly shame that we were unable to do so. The United States remains committed to finding ways to de-escalate this violence, put a ceasefire in place, and start a genuine political process. But for that to happen, there must be an end to the horrific suffering of the people of eastern Aleppo, caused by the current president of the Security Councils and Syrian aircraft. It is time for Russia to stop starving and killing Aleppo's children. Thank you.